Hello, welcome to another tonalist landscape oil painting demonstration. This is your painter in residence, M. Francis McCarthy, and the painting I'm bringing you today is a limited palette demonstration of the pigment Cad Yellow, and we are basically launching our series of pigment paintings with this painting. And you ever hear that expression, if you have to eat a bucket of frogs, eat the big one first? That's what we're doing today, because Cad Yellow I knew would be a challenge, and so it's the first one I went after. So these are the parameters of the series. One pigment color, black and white. And let me tell you, that's been challenging, because in a lot of cases, especially when I'm in with the earth pigments, where I would want things to go yellow, things are going pink because all I have is white. But I have to say, we're making some good paintings anyway, and having these sort of limitations can be really, really beneficial, especially for changing neural pathways in an experienced artist's brain, right? Whereas I'm always going to do certain things, reach for certain things. I'm having some unexpected things happen because of, going after this project and the things that are occurring. So I knew it would be up with Cad Yellow, and that's green. I would be getting green because of the black. Green and then pale yellow with the white. I knew that's what I would be looking at. However, one unexpected thing did happen. I hadn't even thought about it, but I actually got an interesting sort of olive green on the bottom. And a little later on in this series, you'll see when I did the raw umber one, I used the black and white to create some gray tones, so I would have some differences in the sky. So one of the things that'll be the feature of this series, really it's a celebration of Cad Yellow. So first off, let me start with my personal history of Cad Yellow. I did start with Cadmium Yellow back when I first began painting, but I ended up abandoning it when I became interested in tonalism, because everything I'd read told me that it was going to conflict with lead white, and I had a big love affair with lead white that lasted a long time. I think it's safe to say, actually, I'm pretty happy with titanium white now, but I have a lot of experience with my pigments, and so it's not a big deal that I have all that extra opacity that titanium white has. And I don't want this video to become a discussion about lead white versus titanium white, but suffice to say that I got away from Cad Yellow because I had heard that in mixes with lead white it would oxidize and thus turn ugly. So now the great thing about my channel here is I had mentioned that in one of the 600 videos we have here, and somebody came up in the comments and said, no, that's been debunked. You can use them in mixtures together. It's not a problem. And so far it hasn't been. And why is Cad Yellow so popular? I mean, let me tell you why. It's a very strong color that is also very flexible, and it's bright, it's clean, it has great coverage. It's so opaque it's not even funny, and that can be a real advantage in a lot of mixtures. Sometimes it's not an advantage, but maybe we'll have time to get into that too. So I want to read a few little articles since we're celebrating you, Cadmium Yellow. This is a site called Cameo Materials Database. So developed by the Museum of Fine Arts. That's awesome. A permanent yellow pigment composed of cadmium sulfide. Cadmium yellows were synthetically prepared in Germany by Friedrich Strohmeyer in 1817. The bright yellow pigment slowly began to be used as artist paints in the mid-1840s, gaining in popularity in the early 20th century. Variations in particle size and chemical composition produce a range of colors from light yellow to orange. In the 1920s, the cadmium pigments were co-precipitated with barium sulfate to form the cheaper cadmium lithopone pigments. Cadmium sulfide also occurs in minor amounts in the mineral greenockite. Okay, nice. Um, has cubic or hexagonal crystals. It's soluble in concentrated mineral acids, and it's awesome. So let's see what we got in Wikipedia here. It's got a whole page for let's just go to cadmium pigments Wikipedia. So what you got, basically, it gives you the inventor, the time. I didn't really realize it was invented that long ago, in 1817. I can tell you that colors like cadmium coming along are directly responsible for innovations in painting that were achieved with Impressionism. Now, while I'm not an Impressionist, I can certainly appreciate that it was a big change in painting, in that where painting previously had been kind of dark and dingy, Impressionism was bright and light, and relied on strong primary colors being mixed together to create the impression of other colors. At least that's how some Impressionists work. Either way, that's not a discussion either about Impressionism. But I can say that when you look at a color like Cad Yellow, as we're painting with now, you can see that it would be really good one to have if you were an Impressionist. Maybe less so if you're a tonalist. You can maybe get by with some of the softer yellows or warmer yellows. Personally, before I was using Cad Yellow, I was using a color from Gamblin. Well, let me tell you what I was using. Actually, before I used that color from Gamblin, I was using Cadmium Hue, which is a, I think, I don't want to start sprouting out numbers, but that is the same color that's in Gamblin's Hansa Yellow medium, and it's also the same color yellow that's used in stripes on the street to make crosswalks and things like that. So definitely a light, fast sort of pigment, and really powerful in its own way. The difference between Hansa Yellow or the cadmium hue colors and cadmium yellow, the biggest difference is that Hansa Yellow is semi-transparent. I wouldn't even call it semi-opaque. It's got a lot of transparency to it. It's not a transparent color, but I have done glazing and stuff with it in small quantities. Also in the Mike's Green that is on my palette for most of my paintings, that is a mixture of Hansa Yellow and Ivory Black. Now, that gives me a lot more forgiving green than the sort of green that I'm painting with in this painting here, which is a lovely green and perfectly serviceable. It's a lovely, beautiful green. When you mix the yellow with the black, you can see you get quite a nice green and a certain range of greens as well. But it's not as flexible as the green that I make with the Hansa Yellow. Now, that said, I don't actually feature Hansa Yellow on my palette. I just use it to make my Mike's Green, which is in a pile there. And every other alteration I want to make of that green in the yellow direction would be made with the Cad Yellow. And what I found is that having that bit of opacity really gives me a boost. And as you progress with your painting, you're really going to find out, I think, that the nature of the pigment, whether it's transparent or opaque, is really, really critical to the sorts of things that you can get done with the pigment. Like when you're first starting out, you're just struggling along, you're not really sure what your pigments are going to do. And this is one of the bearings also on how a color pigment coming out of a tube is very different than the light you're seeing right now on your computer or your phone screen. That light is pure, it's being created. That color is pure, it's being created with light. Pigments are ground up rocks. Basically, they're ground up minerals, and they're suspended in something like linseed oil or another type of oil, or in the case of acrylics, they're suspended in a sort of medium made out of plastic, right? Anyway, Uh, I just find the Cad Yellow, first of all, the nice thing about Cad Yellow on the palette is I can squeeze some Cad Yellow on the palette even if I don't use it for a while. It doesn't seem to dry on the palette. On the painting itself, it's not a slow dryer, so that's a weird phenomenon. Explain that to me. I am always looking to bring in, like, one of the reasons I brought the Cad Yellow in is that I had at one point a palette that was just almost completely transparent, and it was like the only opaque colors in it were titanium white, if I was using that, because lead white is semi-transparent, and yellow ochre, right? Other than that, maybe if I was using transparent earth red instead of burnt sienna, for example, transparent earth red is completely transparent. So this is one of the reasons I moved to burnt sienna, so I could have that little bit of opacity. So opacity versus transparency is really, really critical. Now, and one of the things I definitely noticed, like I'm about 5 paintings in, I did this one about last week, and in this particular painting I had 2 opaque colors and 1 transparent color, the transparent color being the bone black. Actually, I think I used black spinel here, which is technically opaque. This painting's technically got 3 opaque colors because Cad Yellow and white, titanium white, is extremely opaque. I have to say, I believe the Cad Yellow is just as opaque. And you might go, well, yeah, opaque, transparent, blah, 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 blah. Well, these things do matter, and where you don't, to the degree you don't think they matter, is usually based on a lack of experience with the pigments. And I have to say, I'm very, very passionate about the pigments I use. I'm very passionate about almost every aspect of the painting process, so much so that I'm doing this series. This video is dedicated to you, Cad Yellow. You are awesome, and I love you. I wanted to do a painting that was about Cad Yellow. Now, I couldn't do a painting with only Cad Yellow, but to be honest, if I wanted to do a painting that featured Cad Yellow the best way, I would really want to be able to bring in a red of some type. I could probably get away without a blue, but if I had a red tone, I could have done a nicer, well, I could have done a million things. That what I'm ending up with is a very, very green painting. And it's all good, it's who knows, sometimes the world might look like this. Before we sign off here, all of these paintings in the series are going to be based on Pictorialist photographs from the turn of the 20th century or thereabouts. So if you don't know what pictorialism is, it was a movement in photography that was very similar to the movement in painting of tonalism. It was a poetic and painterly approach to photography, a lot of times involving manipulation of the negative and in the printing process, and sometimes printing something, shooting it again to get another negative, and printing it again to get that painterly effect, incorporating texture of the substrate that you were printing on, etc. I'm not an expert in photography, but I'm a real sucker for pictorialism. I love that. I love poetic old photographs. So what I've done is use some of my Photoshop skills to help me set up some reference that's somewhat colorized in the direction that I want to head with the painting that I'm doing, but the reference will often fall short because, again, I'm working with light in the computer, and pigments don't act the same way. Definitely they do not, and I've been experiencing that firsthand. Anyway, we're getting pretty close to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Now, there will be a live version of this in the members area that'll be all the trials and tribulations as they're happening. So this is also, that as I mentioned there, this has the history of the Cad Yellow and things like that. So good to watch both. But if you want more of this, tip on over to the members area and join up. Until I come back with another video, please do me a favor, take good care and stay out of trouble.